Friends, let's continue with chapter 6. At this point, you may find yourself recognizing all of the sad hallmarks of the Baudelaire orphan's sad history. The word hallmarks refers to something distinguishing characteristics, such as the frothy foam and loud fizz that are the hallmarks of a root beer float, or the tear-stained photographs and the loud fizz that are the hallmarks of a broken heart. Certainly, the Baudelaires themselves, who, as far as I know, have not read their own history, but of course are its primary participants, had a queasy feeling in their stomachs as the islanders approached them, holding various items they had found while storm scavenging. It appeared that once again, after arriving in a strange new home, Count Olaf would fool everyone with his latest disguise, and the Baudelaires would once again be in grave danger. In fact, Count Olaf's Telerik disguise did not even cover the tattoo of an eye he wore on his ankle, as the islanders living so far away from the world would not know about this notorious mark, and so could be fooled even more easily. But as the colonists drew close to the cube of books where Kit Snicket lay unconscious, suddenly the Baudelaire's history went contrary to expectations, a phrase which here means the young girl they had first met on the coastal shelf recognized Count Olaf immediately. "That's Olaf!" Friday cried, pointing an accusatory finger at the villain. "Why is he dressed as a pregnant woman?" "I'm dressed as a pregnant woman because I am a pregnant woman," Count Olaf replied in a high-pitched, disguised voice. "My name is Kit Snicket, and I've been looking everywhere for these children." "You are not Kit Snicket," Mrs. Caliban cried. "Kit Snicket is up on this pile of books," Violet said indignantly, helping Sunny down from the top of the cube. "She's a friend of ours, and she may be hurt or ill, but this is Count Olaf, who is no friend of ours." "He's no friend of ours either," Friday said, and there was a murmur of agreement from the islanders. "Just because you put something inside your dress to look pregnant and thrown a clump of seaweed on your head to make a wig doesn't mean you won't be recognized." She turned to face the three children, who noticed for the first time the islander had a suspicious bump under her robe, as if she too had hidden something under her clothing. "I hope he hasn't been bothering you. I told him specifically to go away." Count Olaf glared at Friday, but then turned to try his treachery on the other islanders. "You primitive people won't tell a pregnant woman to go away, will you?" he asked. "I'm in a very delicate condition." "You're not in a very delicate condition," said Larson firmly. "You're in a very transparent disguise. If Friday says you're this Olaf person, then I'm sure you are. And you're not welcome here due to your unkindness." "I've never been unkind in my life," Olaf said, running a bony finger through his seaweed. "I'm nothing more than a fairly innocent maiden with my belly full of baby. It is the Baudelaires who have been unkind, along with this impostor sleeping on top of this damp library." "Library?" Fletcher said with a gasp. "We've never had a library on the island." "Ishmael said that a library was bound to lead to trouble," said Brewster. "So we were lucky that a book has never ended up on our shores." "You see," Olaf said, his orange and yellow dress rustling in the morning breeze, "that treacherous woman up there has dragged these books to your colony, just to be unkind to you poor primitive people. And the Baudelaires are friends with her. They're the ones you should abandon here, and I should be welcome to Olaf land and given gifts." "This island is not called Olaf land," cried Friday, "and you're the one we abandoned." "This is confusing," said Omeros. "We need a facilitator to sort this out." "Omeros is right," said Calypso. "We shouldn't decide anything until we've talked to Ishmael. Come on, let's take all this detritus to Ishmael's tent." The colonists nodded, and a few villagers walked together to the cube of books and began to push it along the shelf. It was difficult work, and the cube shuddered as it was dragged along the bumpy surface. The Baudelaire saw Kit's foot bob violently up and down and feared that their friend would fall. "Stop," Klaus said. "It's not safe to move someone who may be seriously injured, particularly if she's pregnant." "Klaus is right," said Miss Dr. Kurtz. "I remember that from my days in veterinary school." "If Mohammed will not come to the mountain," Rabbi Bly said, using an expression that the islanders understood at once, "the mountain will come to Mohammed." "But how can Ishmael come here?" asked Erwin. He couldn't walk all this way with an injured foot." "The sheep can drag him here," said Sherman. "We can put his chair on the sleigh. Friday, you guard Olaf and the Baudelaires while the rest of us will fetch our facilitator." "And some more coconut cordial," said Madame Noroff. "I'm thirsty, and my seashell is almost empty." There was a murmur of agreement from the islanders, and they began to make their way back towards the island, still carrying all of the items they had found while scavenging. In a few minutes, the colonists were nothing more than faint shapes on the misty horizon, and the Baudelaires were alone with Count Olaf and with Friday, who took a big sip from her seashell and then smiled at the children. "Don't worry, Baudelaires," the girl said, holding one hand over the bulge in her robe. "We'll sort this out. I promise you that this terrible man will be abandoned once and for all." "I'm not a man," Olaf insisted in his disguised voice. "I'm a lady with a baby inside her." "Pellucid theatrics," Sonny said. "My sister's right," Violet said. "Your disguise isn't working." "Oh, I don't think you'd want me to stop pretending," the villain said. He was still talking in his ridiculously high-pitched voice, but his eyes shone brightly from behind his seaweed bangs. He reached behind him and revealed the harpoon gun with its bright red trigger and one last harpoon ready to be fired. "If I were to say that I was Count Olaf instead of Kit Snicket, I might begin behaving like a villain rather than a noble person." "You've never behaved like a noble person," Klaus said, "no matter what name you've been using. And that weapon doesn't scare us. You only have one harpoon, and this island is full of people who know how wicked and unkind you are." "Klaus is right," Friday said. "You might as well put your weapon down. It's useless in a place like this." Count Olaf looked first at Friday and then at the three Baudelaires, and he opened his mouth as if to say something treacherous in his disguised voice, but then he shut his mouth again and glared down at the puddles off the coastal shelf. "I'm tired of wandering around here," he muttered. "There's nothing to eat but seaweed and raw fish, and everything valuable has been taken by all those fools in robes." "If you didn't behave so horribly," Friday said, "you could live with us on the island." The Baudelaires looked at one another nervously. Although it seemed a bit cruel to abandon Olaf on the shelf, they did not like the idea that he might be welcomed into the colony. Friday, of course, did not know the whole story of Count Olaf and had only experienced his unkindness once, on the day she first encountered him. But the Baudelaires could not tell Friday the whole story of Olaf without telling the whole story of themselves, and they did not know what Friday would think of their own unkindness and treachery. Count Olaf looked at Friday, as if thinking something over. Then, with a suspicious smile, he turned to the Baudelaires and held out the harpoon gun. "I suppose you're right," he said. "The harpoon gun is useless in a place like this." He was still talking in his disguised voice, and his hand caressed his false pregnancy, as if there were actually a baby growing inside him. The Baudelaires looked at Olaf, and then the weapon. The last time the children had touched the harpoon gun, the penultimate harpoon had fired, and a noble man by the name of Dewey had been killed. Violet, Klaus, and Sonny would never forget the sight of Dewey sinking into the water of the pond as he died, and looked at the villain offering them the weapon only, and looking at the villain who was offering them the weapon only reminded them of how dangerous and terrible the weapon was. "We don't want that," Violet said. "Obviously, this is some trick of yours," Klaus said. "It's no trick," Olaf said in a high-pitched voice. "I'm giving up my villainous ways, and I want to live with you on the island. I'm sorry to hear that you don't believe me." His face was very serious, as if he were very sorry to hear that, but his eyes were shiny and bright, the way they are when someone is telling a joke. "Fibber," Sonny said. "You insult me, madame," Olaf said. "I'm as honest as the day is long." The villain was using a used expression that is, one more time. The villain was using an expression that is used by many people despite the fact that it scarcely means anything at all. Some days are long, such as the height of summer, when the sun shines for a very long time, or Halloween Day, which always seems to last forever until it is finally time to put on one's costume and demand candy from strangers. And some days are short, particularly during the winter time, or when one is doing something enjoyable, such as reading a good book or following random people on the street to see where they will go. And so if someone is as honest as the day is long, they may not be honest at all. The children were relieved to see that Friday was not fooled by Olaf's use of the vague expression, and she frowned at the villain sternly. "The Baudelaires told me you were not to be trusted," the young girl said, "and I can see that they spoke the truth. You'll stay right here, Olaf, until the others arrive and we decide what to do with you. I'm not Count Olaf, Count Olaf said, but in the meantime, could I have a sip of that coconut cordial I heard you mention? No, Friday said, and turned her back on the villain to gaze wistfully at the cube of books. I've never seen a book before, she confessed to the Baudelaires. I hope Ishmael thinks it's okay to keep them here. You've never seen a book? Violet said in amazement. Do you know how to read? Friday took a quick look around the coastal shelf and then nodded her head quickly. Yes, she said. Ishmael didn't think it was a good idea to teach us, but Professor Fletcher disagreed and held secret classes on the coastal shelf for those of us who were born on the island from time to time. I keep in practice by sketching the alphabet in the sand with a stick, but without a library, there's not much I can do. I hope Ishmael won't suggest that we let the sheep drag all these books to the Arboretum. Even if he does, you won't have to throw them away, Klaus reminded her. He won't force you. I know, Friday said with a sigh. But when Ishmael suggests something, everybody agrees, and it's hard not to succumb to that kind of peer pressure. Whisk, Sunny reminded her and took the kitchen implement out of her pocket. Friday smiled at the youngest Baudelaire, but quickly put the item back in Sunny's pocket. I gave you that whisk because you said you were interested in cooking, she said. It seemed a shame to deny your interest just because Ishmael might not think a kitchen implement was appropriate. You'll keep my secret, won't you? Of course, Violet said, but it's also a shame to deny your interest in reading. Maybe Ishmael won't object, Friday said. Maybe, Klaus said, or maybe we could try a little peer pressure of our own. I don't want to rock the boat, Friday said with a frown. Ever since my father's death, my mother has wanted me to be safe, which is why we left the world far behind and decided to stay on this island. But the older I get, it seems the more secrets I have. Professor Fletcher taught me secretly to read. Omeros taught me secretly to skip rocks, even though Ishmael says it's dangerous. I secretly gave Sunny a whisk. She reached into her robe and smiled. And now I have another secret just for me. Look what I found, curled up on the broken wooden crate. Count Olaf had been glaring silently at the children, but as Friday revealed her secret, he let out a shriek even more high-pitched than his fake voice. But the Baudelaire orphans did not shriek, even though Friday was holding a frightening-looking thing, as dark as a coal mine and as thick as a sewer pipe, that uncurled itself and quickly darted towards the three children. Even as the creature opened its mouth, the morning sun glinted on its sharp teeth. The Baudelaires did not shriek, but marveled that once again their history was going contrary to expectations. All right, we will continue with this chapter. It's kind of a long one. We'll continue with this chapter on our next video very, very soon. Very soon.